On April 1st, Israel struck the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, killing 7 people, including 2 senior military commanders. This was historically unprecedented. An embassy is considered sovereign territory of the nation it represents, and no state had previously carried out an intentional strike against one. The attack followed the 2020 American drone assassination of General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad, one of Iran's most senior military figures. Together, these events reveal something important. The United States and Israel hold clear military dominance over Iran. That dominance operates on 2 levels. The first is technology. The Israeli jet that carried out the Damascus strike was precise enough to destroy the Iranian consulate without touching the adjacent Canadian embassy. That is the definition of surgical military capability. The second is intelligence. For the strike to succeed, the Israelis had to know in advance that those specific commanders would be in that building at that exact time. Intelligence comes in 2 forms: signals intelligence, which includes intercepting communications and tracking movements electronically, and human intelligence, meaning informants operating inside the target. The Damascus strike almost certainly required both. When Iran responded with Operation True Promise, a package of approximately 300 drones and missiles fired at Israel, Israel claimed that 99% were intercepted and that the attack caused negligible damage, presenting this as proof of Iranian military weakness and the effectiveness of the Iron Dome. Iran's counterclaim was that the attack was deliberately designed to cause minimal damage. The argument here is that Iran's version is more credible, and understanding why requires understanding asymmetrical warfare. Asymmetrical warfare, military dominance does not guarantee victory in war. The clearest evidence of this is the 2002 Millennium Challenge, a US military simulation designed to model an American invasion of Iran. The exercise divided forces into 2 teams, the United States and a fictional opponent modeled on Iran. Despite the United States fielding the most powerful military force in human history, a force so dominant that the combined militaries of every other nation on Earth could not defeat it in a direct confrontation, Iran won simulation. The reason was asymmetrical warfare. The concept is straightforward. When a weaker party cannot win by fighting the stronger party on equal terms, it refuses to fight on equal terms. Instead of sending its navy to confront American aircraft carriers directly, a suicidal move, the simulated Iranian force deployed swarms of small, fast suicide boats in overwhelming numbers. A single American aircraft carrier costs approximately $1 billion. A functional attack drone costs around $1,000. A decoy drone costs $100. A swarm of 10,000 mixed drones costs roughly $20 million. One swarm, if even a fraction gets through, can sink a billion-dollar vessel. The cost asymmetry alone makes this strategy devastating. When Iran ran this successfully in the simulation, the American military restarted the exercise and banned asymmetrical tactics, declaring them outside the rules of the simulation. They then won. This response is itself instructive. It reveals the core vulnerability of dominant military powers, inflexibility driven by hubris. Empires, by definition, have become dominant by fighting a certain way. That success breeds institutional stubbornness. They refuse to adapt to a form of warfare that feels to them like cheating. Vietnam demonstrated this on a massive scale. A vastly outgunned opponent using creativity, terrain, and patience against a superpower insisting on conventional military doctrine. America lost. The Iran strategy matrix. If a full-scale ground invasion of Iran is coming, possibly within the next 2 to 6 years, most likely initiated under a Trump presidency, Iran must accomplish 4 simultaneous objectives from now until that invasion begins. Every action Iran takes should be evaluated against all four. The first is to unite its own population. Iran currently has significant internal division. The women's protest movement of recent years reflects genuine opposition to the government. However, Iranian history with Western interference is long and bitter. In 1909, Britain discovered oil in Persia and created what became British Petroleum, giving Iran only 16% of the profits from its own resource. When Iran's democratically elected government proposed a 50-50 revenue split in 1953, Britain and the United States responded by orchestrating a coup, removing that government and installing the brutal authoritarian Shah. The 1979 revolution that overthrew the Shah was in large part a rejection of that Western imposed order. That historical memory means that even Iranians who oppose their current government would likely resist a foreign invasion. The more aggressive America and Israel become, the more that internal opposition consolidates into national resistance. The second objective is to build alliances. Iran already leads what is called the Axis of Resistance, a network that includes Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, and the Houthis in Yemen. These are not proxy forces that take direct orders from Tehran. Iran provides financial and military support, but cannot fully control their behavior. Iran's denial of involvement in the October 7th Hamas attack reflects this genuine complexity. Beyond the Axis, Iran needs Russia and China. Russia benefits from a US-Iran war because it diverts American attention and resources away from Ukraine, where Russia is currently advancing. Russia's primary contribution would likely be a credible nuclear deterrent threat, a warning to the United States not to use tactical nuclear weapons under threat of nuclear retaliation. China's interest is energy. China imports the majority of its oil from the Middle East and cannot afford American control over both Iraq and Iran's energy infrastructure. China would likely provide weapons and material support while maintaining what is called strategic ambiguity, never officially declaring support for Iran in order to avoid a direct confrontation with the United States. Neither Russia nor China will commit until Iran proves two things: that it will fight and that it can win. The third objective is to win global opinion. The ongoing Israeli military campaign in Gaza, which many observers are characterizing as a systematic effort to remove Palestinians from the territory entirely, is generating unprecedented international opposition. University protests across the United States at institutions like Columbia and Yale reflect a domestic shift in sentiment. For Iran, keeping global attention fixed on Gaza is strategically valuable. The longer this continues, the more sympathy accrues to Iran's position in the broader regional conflict. The fourth objective is to weaken the enemy's coalition. The United States would not invade Iran alone. It would attempt to build a broad coalition, including NATO members and regional partners like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Jordan. Iran's goal is to fracture that coalition before it forms. Much of the American public does not support a war with Iran. France and Germany have limited interest in fighting one. Creating and amplifying internal dissent within the United States and conflict between the US and its NATO partners is itself a form of asymmetrical warfare waged politically rather than militarily. Operation True Promise as strategic proof, evaluated through this four-objective lens, Operation True Promise was not a military failure dressed up as a success. It was a strategic success executed with deliberate military restraint. Launching the strike unified Iran's domestic audience. The government demonstrated it could and would retaliate against Israel. It signaled to Russia and China that Iran is willing to fight. It won global opinion by appearing measured and proportionate, a restrained response to an illegal strike on sovereign Iranian territory, rather than the kind of mass casualty attack that would have generated sympathy for Israel. And it created fracture in the Israeli-American relationship, because Israel's policy of mandatory disproportionate retaliation conflicted directly with American interest in regional de-escalation, forcing the United States to publicly restrain its closest Middle Eastern ally. One additional data point matters. Israel spent at least $1 billion intercepting that strike package. Iran spent between $10 and $30 million launching it. Even in a failed attack, the cost asymmetry ran approximately 3-0 to 1 in Iran's favor. The larger picture: if this conflict escalates to a full ground invasion, the outcome is not predetermined. Empires fall for three recurring reasons: overextension across too many simultaneous conflicts, debt from the cost of maintaining that overextension, and civil unrest as populations turn against the burden. The United States is currently experiencing all three pressures simultaneously. That does not mean America loses a war with Iran. America remains without a peer competitor, but it does mean that a costly, protracted Iranian campaign on asymmetrical terms could accelerate a structural decline that is already underway. The end result would likely not be American defeat in a conventional sense, but a gradual transition from a unipolar world where one nation dominates to a multipolar one, where regional powers like Germany and Europe, Japan and East Asia, and Israel and the Middle East operate with far greater independence. That transition will take decades, possibly longer, but the trajectory is already visible.